we're delighted, I think, to be joined today by the CIC Regulator in terms of bringing their experience, although I should say deputy rather than, so it's not all down to Dale. I think it's fair to say, key lead, but we'll come on to that. The CICs, I guess, for those of us who've been around the sector for a time, introduced in 2005, and I know Dale will give a bit more of this context, but they were really designed for social enterprises that want to use profits and assets for social good in its essence. So I think we're delighted that we're able to bring them to our webinar today. And just to introduce our speakers, so we're going to have a presentation from Dale Walters. Dale is the Deputy Regulator for CICs. He's actually joining us from Cardiff. I hope the weather's as nice in Cardiff as it is in Dumfries and Galloway today. Yeah. And we're also joined in our session today by Lisa Davies from the Registrar of Companies Scotland, who's going to come in on the Q&A. And you'll also see Donna in as a panellist. And Donna's going to be keeping an eye on the chat. So if you've got any specific questions in the chat function, Donna's also with the CIC team. And obviously, we've got that wealth of experience here in terms of understanding CICs in terms of why you would use them, how many there are. So feel free to ask questions. And we hope that the session, I guess, will be useful to those who are either looking at legal structures or work alongside organisations with different legal structures in terms of support organisations. But also if you are a CIC and you have any questions, it's a real opportunity to ask those. So we'll come to those at the end. So I think we should have everyone in now. Thank you for joining us again. Please use the chat. We'll be keeping eyes as we go through, and I'm going to hand straight over to Dale. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Naomi. I'll just share my screen and bring up the presentation so everyone can see it. There we go. Right, good morning, everyone. My name is Dale Walters, and I'd like to welcome you to this presentation on Community Interest Company, or CICs, as we refer to them. I'm the Deputy Regulator in the Office of the Regulator of Community Interest Companies, and we're based in Companies House in Cardiff, and Naomi is right, the weather here is quite sunny at the moment, luckily. Oh, hello.
Just to interrupt quickly, it says it started screen sharing, but it's not showing your presentation yet, so...
Oh, okay. I'll check by the time I finish my introduction if it's come up.
Great.
I've only been in post for just over 2 months now. And I've spent the last 2 months being immersed in the exciting world of CICs. So I'm really pleased to be here to talk with you about them today. I'm also accompanied by Donna Whitcombe, who's the office manager for the CIC team in Cardiff, and Lisa Davies, the Registrar of Companies House, who I'll hand over to you now.
Good morning. I'm also delighted to be here to talk to you all this morning. I've been supporting the CIC Regulator since September and the team last year. I'm the Registrar of Companies here in Scotland. I'm in the Scottish borders, not far from Dumfries and Galloway, and it is a beautiful day. So I'll talk to you a little bit more at the end, and I'll hand you back to Dale. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lisa. Naomi, can I just check, is the presentation showing now?
No. So it says you start. So stop and start again, and it might well come up.
We'll give it a try. There we go.
It came up fine in our practice, so we know it should work.
Here we go. Okay. Can you see that now?
We can. So yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you for that. This is one of the challenges of working from home, I imagine. Luckily, the tech should be with us on our side today. Okay, so welcome to this presentation on CICs. Whilst I may be talking quite quickly, and I do have a fairly strong Welsh accent, please let me reassure you that there will be a link to our website at the end of the session, and that contains all the further information and guidance that you might require based on my presentation. So I will try to speak slowly, though, I promise. Okay, so during this presentation, we will discuss what is a CIC, their background, the differences between a CIC, an ordinary company, and a charity, as well as the benefits and advantages of being a CIC. We will explore the responsibilities of being a CIC, as well as the compliance and the role of the regulator. First of all, though, a bit of backstory. In 2005, the business community recognised a need for a legal form of social enterprise, and this was an alternative to a charity or an ordinary company. It was particularly to benefit the community rather than shareholders or members, and the concept had cross-party government support. The Companies Act 2004 and Community Interest Company Regulations 2005 came into effect, and the CIC office opened in July 2005 in Cardiff. 6 members of staff work in the Office of the Regulator, and we're responsible for the registration and regulation of CICs for the whole of the UK. We work really closely with Companies House Cardiff, Scotland and Northern Ireland, especially with regard to the examination of applications, as this is a dual process. We also work with other government offices such as the Insolvency Service and the Charity Commission. So, what is a CIC? It's an ordinary limited company that has to follow company law as well as CIC requirements. It can be limited by guarantee or limited by shares. It may also be a private limited company or a public limited company. At the end of the last financial year, there were almost 24,000 CICs in total, with 1,365 in Scotland, which represent around 6% the total number of CICs. The majority of our CICs are limited by guarantee, with the remainder being CICs limited by shares. But those that are limited by shares are subject to a dividend cap, and this ensures that the assets and profits of a CIC are benefiting the community. A CIC must pass a community interest test. They must make a statement that their activities will benefit their particular community rather than members and directors. CICs are also subject to a compulsory asset lock. This means all their assets belong to the company and benefit its community. Further, every CIC must submit an annual community interest report with its accounts. The report tells the regulator the CIC's activities during the year, and it also details its relationship with its stakeholders. The report's available on the Companies House register, and this ensures openness and transparency. As with any business, a CIC must show good corporate governance as per company law. Governance arrangements are in the CIC's Articles of Association, and these should be in line with best practice guidance. CICs should take their governance responsibilities seriously, and the regulator will want them to ensure they are in the best interest of the CIC and the community. In terms of exclusions, very few company types cannot become CICs, but CICs should not exist for political or such lobbying-related purposes. We're often asked what is the difference between a CIC and a limited company. Firstly, and most importantly, it is the social purpose. CICs are set up with the main purpose of benefiting their community rather than their directors or members. Ordinary companies may have no such purpose. Secondly, CICs welcome regulation, as it provides a badge of assurance. With regulation being appreciated generally by investors and public alike, ordinary companies, however, are not regulated. As previously mentioned, CICs have a compulsory asset lock, which is enshrined in CIC articles and cannot be removed. An ordinary company has no such mandatory asset lock. CICs also file their annual community interest company report with their accounts, and this states what a CIC has achieved and is placed on the public record. This provides an additional level of accountability not shared by ordinary companies. If a CIC is limited by shares, the dividend cap ensures the profits stay within the company and that 65% of the CIC's profits are reinvested back into the company or used for the community it was set up to serve. And this is not the case with an ordinary company. It's quite straightforward for an ordinary limited company to convert to a CIC, however. They just need to stay as limited by guarantee or limited by shares when converting. Now on to the differences between charities and CICs. Charities are subject to greater regulation than CICs. Charities are run by a board of trustees, but CICs can be run by just one director, and this gives them more freedom in decision making. Charities also receive tax benefits, but CICs cannot. However, unlike charities, CICs operate as a business and can make a profit, so they can hire and fire employees, pay directors, and if limited by shares, can issue dividends, but charities cannot. CICs also have flexibility in changing their objects. For example, a CIC's activities could be a care home for the elderly, but the CIC may diversify and provide childcare. As long as the CIC can prove to the regulator they're still delivering community benefit, they can do it, whereas charities cannot. Finally, a CIC can be a limited company, but as long as a charity is an incorporated charitable company limited by guarantee, it can apply to be converted to a CIC. So the benefits and advantages, what are they? Firstly, CICs are quick, easy and inexpensive to set up. The CIC Regulator's Office provides all the documents, forms and step-by-step guidelines on our website, which applicants are able to view and download. The CIC brand offers reassurance to stakeholders and the general public as it comes with statutory regulatory oversight. Additionally, a community interest company provides the familiarity of a corporate model and limited liability to its members. The general public are familiar in general with the way companies are set up, and directors and members have a limited personal liability should the CIC fail. CICs also have additional statutory clauses that cannot be removed. Every CIC constitution has certain clauses that are unable to be removed, including the asset lock, which I previously mentioned, and members and directors' voting rights. CICs and funding. CICs need to ensure they're able to target the right funding bodies. As a CIC, there's no guarantee of funding, but CICs with their guaranteed asset lock and community benefit test are recognised and respected by third sector funders, local authorities, banks, and investors who may consider investing in good business opportunities which are regulated and also fulfill a social purpose. As with any business, a strong business plan is required, and ultimately CICs are businesses with a social purpose, and they need to succeed in the same way as an ordinary business would. As a CIC, careful consideration should be given to the social impact the business will make, and this can be clarified as part of the annual community interest report and should be specific and relevant to the community the business supports. Further details of funding bodies from banks to social investment bodies as well as business toolkits can be found on our website. As I said earlier, a link will be provided at the end. Now on to the regulator's role. The regulator is an independent public official who decides whether a company is eligible to be formed as a CIC. The regulator also oversees the continuing conduct of CIC's activities. The regulator's office was set up by statute to practice light touch regulation. Generally, CICs are fairly free to operate as long as they continue to benefit the community they were set up to serve. They also obviously need to follow the CIC regulations we discussed earlier. The regulator fully considers each and every application received and always has the final say on its approval. The regulator pays close attention to the incorporation annual returns of CICs. These reports are a clear indication of the success or otherwise of a company, and the overall statistics reflect how CICs are performing across the UK. The regulator has also previously hosted CIC technical panels with members from the third sector and those interested in the sector to inform the ongoing development of CICs, and this is something we're keen to continue moving forward. The number of complaints compared to the number of CICs on the register is minimal, which proves that the vast majority of CICs are doing great work and proving a success to the communities they serve. However, all complaints are treated seriously and confidentially, and the office also works with other government regulatory and enforcement agencies to ensure matters are properly addressed. Maintaining confidence in CICs is a key aim of the regulator. The regulator does have investigatory and enforcement powers, but in the vast majority of cases, concerns and complaints can usually be successfully resolved at an earlier stage. However, the regulator does consider carefully concerns raised about more serious matters, and appropriate action will be taken. So the future. The CIC regulator is committed to digital working and enabling CICs to operate their businesses online. Over the last 3 years, we've enabled the CIC sector to incorporate online and also to file their accounts and CICs 34s online. We continue to work closely with Companies House to identify more digitisation options. The CIC office has an active communication strategy of raising awareness of CICs, and this is done through promotion, mainly through digital engagements, such as this. Particularly given the current restrictions due to the pandemic, this has been extremely useful. We regularly publicise high-profile CICs across a wide range of businesses through our online blogs and have a very active Twitter account with over 2,500 followers, and we're always keen to increase our reach via social media. The success of the CIC model has surpassed all expectations. When CICs began in 2005, Parliament expected 200 incorporations per year. We now exceed that each month, and the number of CICs easily surpasses the total number of cooperatives and community benefit societies. The regulator welcomes the growth of CICs across every economic sector of the UK, and our annual report details the yearly achievements and performance of CICs. Please do take the time to read it when it's published in July. Contact points. You were able to contact us via our email, via telephone, via Twitter, and via our website. The Office of Regulator of Community Interest Companies is responsible for everything that comes into the office, as well as undertaking both registration and regulation of CICs. We deal with ministerial briefing, questions, correspondence, freedom of information requests, media inquiries, events, complaints, general inquiries, and publications of reports, guidance, and our blogs. Our annual reports are easily accessible via our website, along with a host of useful advice for KICs. And I will use this opportunity to shamelessly ask you to follow us on Twitter if you don't already. Please have a browse of our website and email, and phone and write to us if there's anything we can help you with. We're always really, really keen to engage with our customers. Finally, I just wanted to show you a shot of our website, which we maintain. It's available on .gov UK, and all you need to do is just search for CIC Regulator, and here is all the information and guidance which you will find useful. And that is always the starting point whenever we talk to KICs. Please visit our website. We make sure this is updated regularly so that it's all available to you. And that was the end of my presentation. I hope that has been 20 minutes, and I'm conscious I may have been talking quite fast, so apologies if I did. Thank you for attending, though, and I hope you found this both useful and informative.
Thank you very much, Dale. I can already see there's some questions starting to come through in the chat, and I'm going to bring those up in terms of our discussion, because I think the answers are useful for everyone that's attending today's session. And I'd encourage you, if you've got any questions, this is such a great opportunity while we've got Dale and Lisa and Donna with all of their experience here on this session to kind of answer any questions. So if you want to come in and join the conversation, then do come back in, or I don't know if Donna's just keeping an eye on the chat and doing it that way as well. So we're trying to get a balance so that we can really answer all the questions we have. So I'll start with a couple that are in the chat, because I think the answers are useful for everyone. So I guess we know that some funders, I know you said in your presentation there's an ability to apply for funding, and obviously there certainly is, but there are still some funders, I think, that are hesitant about the KIC model. And so there's a couple of questions about that. So one is, first of all, are there any resources available to assure funders who might be more hesitant or unfamiliar with the KICs? And then I'm going to pick up on one particular point that links in with governance, I guess, and broader stakeholders. So perhaps to that first question, is there anything in terms of reassurance for funders? Does the regulator do work with funders to kind of, I guess, build that confidence?
A key motive of the regulator is to build confidence in KICs, and a huge part of that is actually promotion of the KIC model. Obviously, we currently have Louise Smythe as the interim regulator for community interest companies, and I've talked extensively with her about the need for us to continue to promote the KIC model to increase confidence in KICs. As I mentioned in the presentation, that's always at the forefront of our mind. And I think, obviously, having been in post now for 2 months is something which I'm looking at keenly. And I'm very pleased to attend this event, for example, is an opportunity and the starting point to begin that conversation. I think whatever promotion that we're able to do with the KIC model in order to reassure funders and to give them confidence in the KIC model is, something which we're very keen to achieve. And I think that'll be part of an ongoing conversation that we'll be having, if I can give you any assurances in that regard.
No, thank you, Dale. I mean, again, I'd just say, certainly from a Social Enterprise Scotland perspective, if there was a chance where we can ever host a session that's particularly just with funders and yourself, we would be happy to put that on or introduce you to some of those funders networks if there's funders that would be interested in that as well. So we're always happy to help broker some of that and pull that together if it's useful. I want to pick up on a particular point, I guess, about, and maybe this is where some of the nervousness from a funder comes in. And obviously you spoke about a KIC can operate with just one director. And often when people apply for funding, I guess what they're looking for is wider community involvement in an initiative. So how can a KIC how would you balance that thing between KICs having one director with ensuring that they follow best practice governance? So are there ways around that you've seen people do? Do they use steering groups rather than formal directors? Or have you seen that that's not an issue for a lot of the KICs that you've worked with? Or have you had that feedback from other funders?
In the short time I've been working in the team, I can say that it's not something that's raised its head. Donna might have a better idea in terms of historical situations like that. I suppose it really depends on what the KICs activities are and what they're actually working on. So if you have our KICs range now from being very small entities to extremely large ones. So I think it really depends on what that individual KIC's focus is. I don't know if Donna has any further information she can provide here.
To be truthful, large majority of KICs are just, you know, as the terminology we call it, one-man bands, and we don't envisage any issues with them. Obviously, in terms of like governance and everything, that as we say, we're quite relaxed in that respect. We're not as stringent as the Charity Commission, so it would just be down to the KIC really to, you know, ensure they're complying with governance.
I think it's fair to say that we haven't been made aware of any particular issues with our one-man bands, if you wish. But it's interesting that people have that kind of saying that there is that kind of concern. I don't know if it's particular funders or, you know, if it's a particular issue with, you know, a particular KIC, and obviously we can't comment on that. But, you know, it's not something which has really flagged itself up to us previously.
Okay, thank you, Dale. That's helpful. I mean, I've certainly heard it in certain the conversations in the Scottish context, I guess, sometimes that people have found some funders more hesitant. And I think it is about that. How does a KIC demonstrate that much broader community involvement? So yes, the community interest is there and it's built into the legal structure, but how do they provide the reassurance if they've not got a bigger board and more people from a community involved? So I think it's perhaps just worth thinking through. I want to pick up on a few other questions that are coming through. There's one that I guess relating to digitalisation, and I'm delighted to hear that you're looking more at that agenda. I always smile, I think, when it's you go to do your Companies House bits of filing and you have to get your checkbook out still. I always find it quite, I'm sure I'm not the only one that ever finds that I'm just scrabbling around for a checkbook because they're not asked for by many people. So the question relates to kind of submissions online. So obviously the question is that obviously full accounts can be submitted online, but as most KICs are eligible to produce micro accounts, is there a plan to be able to submit that online?
This is part of an ongoing discussion that we are having at the moment with Companies House. Obviously, I think we've made quite big steps in terms of digitizing our processes just before the pandemic and after the pandemic. And I think that has been particularly useful in terms of supporting our KICs during this significantly difficult time. Ultimately, that's an ongoing conversation, which I'm actually having with Louise and with Lisa. If Lisa wants to come in here as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we have done quite a lot of work in the crisis for uploading documents that are still paper, etc. But also you might be aware that there's been a big consultation taking place for the future of kind of Companies House, and a lot of that involves the kind of technical detail. It's called something called IXBRL, and the format that we do accounting. So we're going to be doing a lot of work in the next few years about developing our systems to work with that. So yes, we are trying to take steps forward to make our systems more digital, but we're also conscious that there are going to be some big changes in the future, and we want to ensure that we invest at the right time, I suppose. So so in answer to your question regarding, you can get like software, etc., and there is some guidance on it on the Companies House website of how to do uploading of your microentity accounts, which we could share with you. But the development of the digital version of that at the moment is not in train, because we're looking at what our medium-term plans are to do enablement of digital accounts across the board. Okay.
No, thank you, Lisa. It's helpful to get that. And like you say, the move, I guess, to turn everything digital, we've had to prioritise, I guess, particularly in the last 12 months, what we're able to do, because we can't suddenly change everything all at once. So it's useful to understand that context.
I was going to quickly say, I think more than ever, I think the KIC office is working closely with Companies House, and we're working very collaboratively, I think, to kind of deal with some of the issues that have come up. And I think that's going to be hopefully part of our ongoing conversation together.
Right, it's a really lively chat today, which is brilliant. But I'm trying to flick through to the questions. There's a great one here that's come in. I guess we often see lots of, I think you picked up on it yourself, obviously charities have tax benefits, and I guess charities often get access to a lot of other benefits. I'm thinking of even just things like Microsoft offering discounts, Google Ads, all those kind of schemes. Given the social purpose of community interest companies, could the regulator be doing more to support KICs in terms of qualifying for those benefits is the work that the regulator does. I mean, obviously it can't suddenly be asking Microsoft, it's in Microsoft's gift, not the regulator, but how do we raise the profile of that with some of the companies, and are the things that we should be looking to do about tax benefits moving forward?
I think it's a tricky one, because obviously, it's been very clear that this really only applies to charities, and I think to engage wider with businesses, whether it be Microsoft or whoever, would be part of a ongoing and interesting conversation. I think to reassure them, like you've already said, it's in their gift to give their benefits wherever they choose. How we would actually go about having that conversation, I think, would be really interesting. And whether they would actually it would yield results is another question. But I think that is something which is on the regulator's radar. But I think we've only recently had communication on this from some of our customers. So I say it's early days in terms of us looking at and considering this as something which we might discuss in the future.
Thank you, Daya. Just reading through the questions, again, some of them very particular, I guess, about funders and some of that nervousness. And I guess we picked up that we thought that might be a question that would be quite prominent in today's session. So, yeah, there's a bit of chat about people needing a minimum of 4 directors. So, it's definitely an issue out there, I think, for funders and some of those one-man bands. Just while I'm reading through some of the questions, perhaps I'll come with one I got prepped, because what's interesting to me is I think we're seeing a whole change, and I don't know whether that's led by consumers, and I guess social media has made companies much more kind of open, whether you're a private limited company or a charity, on how you operate, and consumer interest in that. Are we seeing kind of, with all of the chat around kind of more, I'm thinking the B Corp movement and the on-purpose agenda that we're hearing a lot about, a lot of businesses perhaps almost trying to extend from just doing CSR into really building purpose into their organisations. Do you think that's leading to a rise in terms of the number of KICs that are being set up? You talked about originally you'd looked at 200 per year. You're actually doing that. And I looked at a few of the stats before our webinar based on the Social Enterprise Census Scotland census. I can't get my words out today. And I think I was saying to you just before we went live that since the 2017 data set, and the 2019 data set, we saw a 60% increase in the number of KICs. So it's definitely, we're seeing that growth as well. So we had 884 KICs in the 2019 census. And if I recall, and I'll ask you to reveal the stat on the number that you'd looked up, but we're seeing that growth continue, is my understanding from the conversation we had before.
Very much so. And I think that's the which we're very encouraged to see. Obviously, we want the model to succeed, and we feel like it really has, from what it was originally intended when it was created in 2005. So the stats we have is that in total, there are nearly 24,000 KICs across the UK, and 1,365 of those are based within Scotland towards the end of the last financial year. So that's a significant increase from the stats which I know you were looking at, Naomi. And I think that really does go to speak volumes in terms of how people are being motivated by that social purpose. And I think obviously we've had a number of things happen over the last year which have really motivated people to look at how they can benefit their communities and bring together their communities. And I think that's really important. And it's something which, we in the KICs office really champion and admire of our KICs, that they are so driven to establish themselves and look to deliver that benefit. The regulator believes passionately in the KIC model and believes passionately they are a movement for social good. And I think that the incorporations that we've seen coming through in the volume that we're seeing really does speak volumes about the success and intent of the model. We're very proud of it, as I hope has come across in our presentation, and we really believe in it. And I hope that really comes across.
I think it certainly has. I think, I would say I think all organisations, regardless of legal structure, should certainly think about their social and environmental impacts. And I think we're seeing that happen regardless of legal structure at the moment, just again, linked in with that consumer interest piece, I think. So a very practical question someone's asked here. So is there a register of KICs? So if someone wanted to look up kind of where how many KICs there are in Scotland and who they are? Is there somewhere they can go to look that up?
There is a register where you can look up the case, so you can do that via the company SIC website. Obviously, Lisa is able to provide more information about how you're able to access the register online. Lisa?
Yeah, so there's the Companies House service where you can search to see any named KIC that you have. We don't publish a specific KIC register per se, but obviously because a KIC is also a company, it's on the register that's open for everybody to view free of charge.
Thank you. I think again, you'll have seen some of the chat, but some of the context around that is obviously when people are applying, maybe, and it is applying to funders or other people in terms of saying what kind of company they are. Obviously, people can go and look on the charity list, but are just noting that on the Companies House list, it doesn't specifically state that they have that asset lock and that social purpose, and that's sometimes a barrier. So is that a misunderstanding on there?
The asset lock is visible when they look at through the actual filings and in their incorporation documents. So if a funder wishes to investigate a KIC, then they're able to go onto the Companies website and they can see all of the filings that KIC has made, and they can see their objects and their activities, their stated activities, and also the agreement around the asset lock, which is available to them. Whilst we aren't able to provide a specific number of KICs in a particular area, and we don't provide that information, obviously we do provide information in terms of the number of KICs across the UK. I think that if any funders have any questions in that regard, they can always contact our office, and potentially we would be able to give them the information they require. And we're always really happy to give and support in that regard.
Thank you. That's really helpful, because again, I always think these are about finding out information, but if there's misunderstandings, that we can try and get those fixed as well. It's a real good opportunity. So there's a few specific questions as well, just in terms of perhaps people who've applied to be KICs but turned down. I mean, obviously you've said that there's people have to demonstrate that kind of community interest. Do you have applications from people that you turn down? How many might you turn down annually, and what might be the common reasons for that?
It really varies, and we are actually undertaking a piece of work now where we're looking at common rejection reasons to identify what the kind of barriers are to our customers, and also to help them with any kind of guidance that they will need around the application process. One of the key issues that we see is usually around signatures, and often we reject a significant volume for signatures not being included on documents. Now, what we've tried to do is we obviously run a hot phone line where we're able to give guidance around how to actually complete your form, and we provide that guidance. And if we do reject, we are very keen to give clear and a detailed explanation about exactly what is required, so that if you are rejected initially, there's an increased chance of success when you subsequently do file your application. But it really varies in terms of the numbers, in terms of how many we reject and how many we accept in any given month, or indeed in any given year. I think what we have seen is that obviously, and naturally, with the increase in the amount of applications we receive, there is obviously going to be an increase potentially in the amount of rejections we receive. And we're really keen to kind of tackle that issue and look to identify exactly what it is our customers need, whether it is the case that we need to improve the guidance we have online, or be clearer in our communication, or indeed, use this opportunity to kind of deal with any specific questions that people have around the form. One of the issues that people aren't aware of, usually miss, is, like I said, the signature issue. Our incorporation documents require a wet signature, and that's actually in the KIC legislation, so you can't print the signature. And obviously we see that as, we see that coming through a lot, that people actually do put in a typed name. That's an automatic rejection, for example. And that's something we're looking to ensure that our customers are fully aware of when they submit it. And I think that's, again, part of our ongoing conversation in terms of how we kind of look at that and what we can do to kind of support our customers better. We also look at our actual forms to see whether there's other information we're able to include on our actual KIC forms, which may help our customers in terms of submitting a successful application first time. But there's a lot of work that we're currently doing in the office to try and make sure that all this is joined up to really support our customers and make sure that we are getting successful applications first time. But again, it really depends on, I think, in terms of the community interest test, we work on the basis that would a reasonable person consider this application to benefit the community? And we take that kind of viewpoint. We apply the test consistently, and we also discuss as a team to ensure that we all have a consistency in terms of how we approach consideration of every application. So a lot of thought goes into almost every single application to make sure we have that consistency. I hope that answers your question.
No, I'm glad you picked up on that point about how you look at that from a community interest perspective at the end, because I think, I think where there has been that fear of the kick model, it's been a fear of perhaps what we see, a fear of the equivalent of greenwashing, or people using a status to raise funds when actually what they really wanted to do is set up a private limited company. And so I think it's really important that focus on that community interest and understanding how you really do look at that is really important, because I think that for me is where the reassurance back to funders will come from, and the reassurance I think back to the sector, where there's a nervousness about the kick model, perhaps sometimes for that greenwashing approach, and just making sure it's done right. So I think I'm glad you picked up on the community interest point at the end. So really important, I think. Again, some very specific questions coming in. It's back to the digitalisation. I probably should never have mentioned about getting my checkbook out, Lisa. So it's a very specific question. When will KICs be able to pay annual fees via online payment functions rather than having to hunt for that checkbook?
I honestly don't know. Yeah, so we've got the online process, but I mean, I can say to you, when I'm in the office in Edinburgh, we get inundated with checks, postal orders. We've had some new members of staff who joined us recently, and they'd not seen a postal order before. And I was like, we get lots of these. So I mean, it is something that as a company's house across the board would like to do something about. And as Louise Smythe is currently the CIC regulator, she's on board with trying to do the same for KICs as well. So we've got the real benefit of trying to do it together. A lot of things for us require legislative change, and because we've got to automate the paper to the digital. It's something we really want to do, not only for the customer and to be in a more modern age, but also it's really difficult to handle. And one of the things that we've seen during the COVID pandemic is we've had to introduce an upload service. So for people to be able to comply with their legal obligations to tell us about a confirmation statement, and who their person of significant control is, for example, requires a fee to be submitted. And that's been difficult when it's been paper only. So we've designed an upload service, and to that we've added gov.uk pay. So it's something that we're working to try and do across all our services. So we aspire to do it. How quickly I can achieve that, I honestly can't say.
Yeah, I think it's useful for people to understand that actually sometimes that barrier in terms of needing the legislative, there's some tricky words in today's webinar, aren't there? Legislative changes is really important, because I think sometimes there's a frustration of like, surely everyone has to do this now, but actually it's not as simple for you in terms of that regulation framework. So I think it's useful for people to understand that. A very practical question again, maybe for you, Dale, you spoke about obviously the need for the wet signature. Can it be scanned, or must the application be sent by post?
That's an interesting question. Donna can come in with this, I think, because we may have had a lot of conversation about signatures.
No problem. I did reply in the chat. So yeah, it can be scanned. What we advise, obviously, especially at the moment due to the pandemic, if you just do a signature on a piece of paper, take a photo of it, and then you can drag and drop it within the CIC 36 form, and that then needs to be PDF'd, and then you can submit online. So
there you go, clear answers. Thank you, Donna. Sometimes it's these practical questions that are they're really helpful, because people are sat there not quite knowing. And I think I've just seen Duncan note in the chat, we can record some of these very practical answers and questions we can perhaps turn into a bit of maybe an FAQ or a quick info sheet that we can send out to people that were at today's webinar as well. So we can try and do that.
what I would also say is that we have done our own webinar, and most recently where we focused on common rejection reasons. And I would direct any of you that if you wanted to have a look at the webinar on our website, it talks you through an incorporation process and deals with a number of the practicalities, which I think a number of you are raising. So I would strongly recommend that you watch that webinar, because I think it comes with a lot of practical advice, which you would find very helpful.
Thank you. And maybe we can look that up at Social Enterprise Scotland and share that link out to people after the webinar as well when we send out the slides, because I always think let's make it easy for people to find things.
Absolutely.
And I'd also say here in Scotland, I mean, there's lots of kind of business support advice out there through things like the Just Enterprise programme we've got here. First Port runs sessions on legal structures, because it is complicated if you're at an early stage, looking at what kind of legal structure you do go through. So if you ever need to know about any of those sessions, I'd also say to people on the webinar today, look at things like the Just Enterprise session and some of the stuff that they do around choosing a legal structure, because it is complicated. And that probably brings me into a question I was going to ask, hopefully not too tricky one, Dale. Obviously, you talked about conversion and you said it was pretty easy to convert to a KIC. Now, my experience tells me in this sector that sometimes the legal structure people choose at the start of their social enterprise journey isn't necessarily always the one that they see themselves having in 2, 3, sometimes even 6 months' time rather than years, because it's a complex field. If people had set up as a KIC but then felt it wasn't the right model for them, how do they go about doing the conversion back the other way? Is that much more complicated?
It's an interesting question, and it's something which, you know, as I've said, I've only been in post for 2 months, and I think in terms of the conversions, it's a really interesting thing that I'm currently still learning about. Donna and I have talked about the conversion process, and she's really au fait with it. So, Donna?
Yeah, basically, once you become a KIC, you can't convert back into an ordinary limited company. You can do it vice versa. You can be a limited company and convert over to a KIC. However, company law basically you're not able to change the constitution type. So if you were just a limited company by guarantee and you want to convert to a KIC, you would have to stay by guarantee. And obviously the same whether you were shares, you couldn't change it. But as I say, once you become a KIC, the next step then is either to become a CIO or a charity. There's no going back. So that's why we obviously try to inform our customers that it is a big step, and, you know, for them to get all the advice and the guidance they need before making that final decision.
I think that's really hammers home the point about the fact that when somebody wants to set up a KIC, they really have to have that social purpose at heart, because I think you have to have something which you actually believe in, because it's not the simple case that you can revert. The only step left to you is to change into, as Donna said, a CIO or a charity, and, you know, find that you'll move that extra step on. So I think that really hammers home the point that they should really consider strongly what it is they want to achieve by establishing their KIC, and that we take it very seriously in terms of the application for a KIC as well.
Thank you. I think that's helpful to understand, because I think, you know, I'm always very conscious that when people give legal structure advice, that they understand, you know, what is possible, should it not be right in a few years' time, because it is a complex area. And I also think that maybe that, again, is reassurance back to funders that actually that asset lock really is in place with the KIC. So given the only structure you could really convert back to would be that kind of charitable model where the assets are protected, I think would give some of that reassurance. It's another practical question. And if you've got any other questions, if you're listening in on this session that you want to ask, do put them into the chat function. So it's a question about directors. Obviously, we see this a lot, I think, in private companies, where it might be husband and wife teams or friends that come together to join a company. So what's the guidance from a KIC perspective on directors being related to each other, and also on directors being paid? Because again, I think that's one of the key reasons sometimes why that thing about why people set up a KIC is because they want that social purpose, but equally they can't afford to do it as a volunteer, so they need payment, and that's what puts them off the charitable function, albeit it's a much more complicated field. We've got the Oscar CEO of Oscar joining us in one of our webinars coming up, so we can touch on the specifics around charity registration perhaps with them. But where would your perspective be on directors being related and directors being paid?
Dale, are you okay for me to answer this one?
Oh, please do, Donna, yeah.
Basically, in terms of relationships between directors, that is not covered under KIC legislation. That's covered under companies law. So as Companies House provides the lines on that, to be honest. Lisa might be able to provide a little bit more information. But in terms of obviously directors being paid, you know, a KIC is a limited company. By all means, you know, it has staff it needs to pay, whether that be directors, you know, volunteers in some sort of, you know, recognition for their work. So that is completely allowed. That's not an issue. Obviously we would double check to make sure, you know, it's appropriate according to the KIC's earnings, you know, that to make sure everything's consistent, and obviously that the community is getting the benefit and it's not just the directors or the staff which are purely benefiting.
The payment has to be reasonable. I think that's what we say, is that, you know, you can't just suddenly pay somebody an inordinate amount of money for a particular service they provide. It has to be a reasonable amount of money, and I think that's the rule of thumb by which we go.
Thank you. I mean, that's helpful, I think, for people to understand. And again, that to me is all that reassurance back with people that are nervous about the KIC model, that it is all the stuff that's looked at. I'm conscious, we said we'd be on the webinar till 12 o'clock, and I know that we're just over, so I'm hopeful I've got time for maybe 2 more quick questions, but if you need to go, I understand that too, but are we good? We good? Okay, thank you. Are there any statistics on whether KICs limited by shares are successful in raising finance from investors and whether they're managing to pay dividends? Obviously, we've got the cap that's there that enables that model to be used. Are there any examples you could perhaps point people towards looking at?
We don't necessarily hold that information. If we down to the funders, really. Obviously, in terms of criteria, we can't advise funders, obviously, you know, what it is they're particularly looking for in order for KICs to be eligible for funding. So yeah, I would suggest you speak to the funders about any statistics on that.
The only time we would be aware of any is if we engage with any and we ask any to write blogs for us, or indeed, you know, if one of the KICs which we might publish in our annual report, which will give details about their activities and if they're particularly successful. But other than that, I can't think of any. As Donna said, we wouldn't keep the information in terms of that. No,
thank you. I guess that's understanding the role that the regulator has and also the role that they don't have, I guess, in terms of what it is that you track as an organisation develops. For the person that asked that question, I wonder whether it might be, you know, I would probably ask people like Social Investment Scotland, or people that have, ultimately that's been loan finance, but they've got their CIC Ventures programme that's also helped people raise different types of money, and whether they've got people that they know of that could help answer that question. Just an idea, but I think it's still relatively new, which is why there's no one jumping in with an obvious answer. But I didn't want to avoid the question. And then perhaps just the last kind of bit, and there's so many questions. We may well end up inviting you back on to do another session at some point in the future. It's all about raising the profile, Dale, so I'm sure you'd be up for it.
Absolutely.
But just in terms of what kind of businesses do people tend to set up? I think you spoke about kind of nursery care and healthcare, but does it tend to be kind of mental health or health and education tend to be the key themes, or is it very broad?
I mean, I feel it's very broad. I'm sure Donna will echo that or correct me if I'm wrong, but I see it as being a very broad, actually, indeed. And I think that's really exemplified by, for example, the case studies which we've looked at for the annual report for this year, which go from healthcare through to the arts sector, through to, you know, it really educationally, you know, it really does vary. And I think that goes to show the versatility of KICs, actually, that we aren't seeing them focusing on one particular area. They can apply to so many different areas of, you know, the community and benefit so many different people. And I think that's one of its strengths. And yes, so in answer to your question, I think it's a very broad, very broad model.
As I say, in the 3 years I've been in post, it's completely a mixed bag. Now it's gone from like your little youth centres or local little coffee shops to, you know, multi-million-pound NHS spin-offs. It's really diversified massively, and
I think the more
continue to grow.
The sort of the way the kicks were envisaged when they started, I think it's completely surpassed our expectations in terms of how they have grown and what they've turned into and what they have looked at, and the kicks which exist, which have made successes, you know, and really kind of ploughed the field, if you want, for others to follow. You know, I think that really comes across from the communication we have with kicks. So
absolutely. I'm conscious, again, lots and lots of questions, and there's a few I haven't got round to. So I'm going to leave the chat open. There's one on dual structures that I might just ask a last question on. So we're seeing, I think I already said, the legal framework for how you set up a social enterprise is incredibly varied. Do you become a kick, a charity? Some people have even just gone down the straight company route, but put mission locks in within their memorandum and then their articles so that it's kind of there and can't be changed that easily. Is your advice just, and this will be my last one, around dual structures, so where kicks might be subsidiaries of private companies? Is that something you've seen? Is that something that you, I guess, even allow? And how do we kind of manage those kind of dual aspects in terms of when as an organisation in a group, people they might have a kick, or they might have a charity, and they might have a private company?
It is something we allow, and it is something we do see. There's nothing to stop this from happening. There's nothing within kick legislation. Obviously, the asset lock would still apply. So although, you know, the private company could, you know, pass anything over to the kick, it wouldn't be able to be vice versa. So obviously otherwise it'd be in breach of kick legislation. As I say, the actual structures of kicks is just forever changing at the moment. If we're seeing the most randomest queries we've seen in a long time, to be honest, in terms of the structures. But yeah, like I say, I don't think there'd be any issues with that. We have got a few, obviously, with subsidiaries of charities, subsidiaries of private companies. Perhaps it's just a little community project they wanted to do alongside their day-to-day, you know, ordinary limited company. Yeah.
And we're seeing them make a success of it as well. And I think that, you know, that also speaks volumes, because ultimately, you know, we want to encourage them to grow. And as long as they are delivering the community benefit and adhering to the kick regulations, you know, we are happy, and our success, we are happy in terms of how they operate.
No, thank you. I think it is a field that's ever changing, and like you say, we're seeing the growth in kicks, and I guess that's going to bring more and more diversity in terms of what they do. I'd just like to say a big thank you. We've had so many questions in today's webinar. I am going to take the time to just collect some of the chat so we can try and keep a note, I guess, of some of the answers and the questions. So I'd also like to thank her. Donna's been busy typing responses to specific questions as we go through as well. So thank you to her for doing that. Thank you to Dale. Thank you for Lisa for joining us. I'm sure we'll end up running another session with you. It's been really popular, and perhaps picking up on that point around how do we raise some of the, I guess, broader issues kicks are facing in our role as Social Enterprise Scotland, and taking that forwards as well. So thank you to all of our attendees for being really engaged today. We will share the session. I'm assuming you're okay for me to just share out your slides, Dale, and we'll add in that link to the webinar that you mentioned as well. And thank you, everyone. And we'll hopefully have you back on in a session in the future. Great, you could join us. If you do want to know more about the Oscar system in terms of the charities, like I say, we've got the CEO of Oscar joining us, and I can't tell you the date, but it's coming up. So do check out our events that are coming up as well. So thank you to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah.